Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us again for our webinar series, Exploring Blue Culture. Today, our topic is Voices from the Police Union. And joining us today are our cultural anthropologists. We have Ken Price and Robert Adams for being here. We are Blue Courage Master Trainers Michael Nila and Captain Jack Hart. And our guest today is Lieutenant Tracy McCray, Vice President of the San Francisco Police Officers Association. I will now turn it over to Jack to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky, and good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday to all of you, and thanks so much for taking time to join us on this cultural exploration webinar. I think this is our 10th now, so thank you for joining us each and every week as you have, as we continue to build on these questions that we're asking, hoping to define culture and to find a way through it and to develop from pain to growth as we deepen this exploration. So thank you again so much for joining us. In our first session, our cultural anthropologists, Ken and Robert, discussed how leaders have to be both in the organization and above it to ensure a clear field of view that observes the culture from different perspectives. Now, imagine the value of a perspective from someone who experiences a police organization from in it as a working cop, above it in formal leadership, and outside of it as a city resident, as a lateral when SFPD merged with the SFO Airport Police, and as a union vice president. Well, today our guest has all of these attributes and so many more as we take our discussions on exploring blue culture in today's episode, Voices from the Union. Quick introductions. In his 50th year in policing, Police Commander Emeritus from Aurora, Illinois, and founder of Blue Courage, please welcome Michael Nila. An applied cultural anthropologist and senior engagement leader, consultant, and managing partner with Thomas Leland. Welcome, Dr. Ken Price. A cultural anthropologist who specializes in diversity and inclusion, mindful leadership, organizational change, and strategic planning. Please welcome Dr. Robert Adams, Jr. And our guest today is a native San Franciscan with well over 25 years of policing experience, who has served in a variety of patrol assignments, including as the sergeant in charge of Bayview Police Station's public housing team and an invaluable leader at the Candlestick Park detail during San Francisco 49ers games. She currently has multiple full-time jobs as a patrol lieutenant, a mom, and as a vice president of the San Francisco Police Officers Association. Please welcome Tracy McCray. Good afternoon, Tracy.
What's up, Jack?
Now, I just want to say that good to see you. I just want to say that we did not color coordinate our outfits today, although this is a clue that Mark Twain might have been onto something when he said the coldest winter he ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. Yeah, so
You're
clearly
correct.
we're both manifesting that with our heavy coats on, and you can see Michael in warm Aurora wearing a Tommy Bahama, and that's just the difference between where we are. But thank you so much for taking time to join us.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, could you tell us how you came to policing and how your family and experiences shaped and informed that journey?
Oh my God. I guess it started with staying up late at night with my grandmother, who loved to watch all the old police TV shows, Barnaby Jones, Mannix, Columbo, the Rookies, you name it. And so I guess that's how my love began. And then in high school, Chief Heather Fong, who was a sergeant at the time, came back and spoke to us at Career Day and talked about, being a police officer. And I just thought to myself, yeah, that's what I want to do, because I didn't want to do a 9-to-5. I didn't want to do desk work, stuck with paperwork, never getting outside. And then transitioning, our family has a history in joining the military. So I joined the military out of high school because I knew I kind of wanted to do this. And I felt the military would give me that background. So I became a military police officer. And from there, I just continued on. So that's how it all began. I never thought sitting up, eating ice cream at 11:30 at night, watch TV with my grandma. Here I am 30 years later.
That's fantastic. And being a city kid and growing up in town, you talked to us briefly the other day about one of your early experiences when you left home and joined the military, and sort of that eye-opening experience of life outside of San Francisco. Would you talk a little bit about that and your experience joining the military?
So when I joined the military, I was sent to Fort McClellan, Alabama. And my whole family is from the South. They're from Louisiana. And I remember my grandparents specifically talking to me about when you go back down south, now this is 1985, it's a different world. It's not how it is in California. And I really didn't understand what they meant by that. And so I go to Alabama and I'm doing my training. I get the weekend pass to go in town. So I'm in town and I'm realizing, you know, they don't have sidewalks. It's all dirt roads. And I was like kind of tripping, like they don't have sidewalks. Okay. So I'm walking down the street and a car full of kids come by and they yell out the window, "Get off the road, nigger." And I was like, I turned around, I'm like, who are they talking to? And then I realized I was the only Black person on the street. And I go, okay, I guess they're talking to me. And she was right. I had never experienced that before. And so, but I really didn't think anything of it because, you know, from California, I grew up in really a very diverse community. So I didn't really understand where they were coming from. So I go back to the base, you know, I do my thing and I come back home and I tell my grandparents, yeah, you're right. It's really different down in the South. And this was 1985 and it wasn't that long ago, you know, so it was eye-opening in the respect of there was still a lot of work to be done. And then I come home and I just go back to kind of doing what I always did and realizing that the divide was real, so to speak.
Hmm. And Michael, I know you have some questions for Tracy.
Yeah, I have a lot of them. Thank you for being with us, Tracy. You know, given the rich landscape of your life, it is one that very few American police officers would share. You know, growing up in the projects, you know, playing sports as you did, the military police, policing the projects, an FTO to hundreds of police officers, representing the police officers at the district level, and now on the executive board of the POA, not to mention your powerful family influence and legacy. How does that rich background inform or fuel the empathy and sense of fairness that you bring to the role of police officers? Because today, so many people are saying the police need empathy, we need to focus more on fundamental fairness, which is procedural justice. How does that inform you?
I think we've always had empathy as police officers. We're just talking about it more. But I think I know where people are coming from. I grew up in public housing, the projects, the pros, as they call it, a single mom. You know, my father wasn't in my life growing up. So by all accounts, most people would have written me off, right? Because I didn't have what I guess you're supposed to have to be successful. But that's how you define it. How do you define your success? I had a mother who wanted to finish her education. My mom went to Grambling University, or it was Grambling College back then, right? Legendary coach Eddie Robinson was her PE teacher. I have they had a yearbook. I have that, right? So it wasn't that she didn't have the advantages, it's just a couple of choices that she chose to make, right? But she still wanted better. So she took me to her nursing classes when she couldn't find a babysitter for me. So going to school was important, right? My grandparents always told me, get your education. So my mom showed me that it was important to get your education. And she fought for my sister and I to have an education, right? We went to private school, St. Rose Academy. As a single mother on a single mom income, right? So she did all of this to want our lives to be better. And so when I would go out into public housing in the Bayview, where I still have friends, I have family that lives there, just to say, you know, just because you start somewhere doesn't mean you end up there, right? You can become whoever you want to become. Don't let someone else write your story. You write your story and where you want to be. And so I was never told that I couldn't be something. It was like, you are going to become something, right? So my mom, just my great role model, because she wanted better for my sister and I. And I think that my mom did an incredible job being a single mom during the time, especially as a Black woman, you know, and trying to overcome everything that maybe have been put up in her way. You know, I always say there are about 3 to 5 times in your life where you make decisions that are going to affect your future. And sometimes you know that, and other times you don't, but you have to take that leap of faith. And so that's what my mom did. And so because of her leap of faith and what she was able to do, I'm who I am today. And I'm trying to get better. And I want what's better for my daughter too. So each generation wants what's better for their kids, right? So my daughter, I want the best for her. Way smarter than me, I'll tell you that. So, but I think I'm getting there, and she's doing what she needs to do to keep carrying that tradition on.
And Tracy, you bring that to how you police. Am I correct? You bring that, all those things that you've been taught through your upbringing, your life experiences, and through your, your mother and all the role modeling from your other family members. You police in that same way. Am I correct?
I do. When I was at Bayview, and even now as a lieutenant, you kind of don't have the closeness that I did when I was a sergeant. And I think Jack can understand this when you have your team. But, my team was my family. And as all families, we could be dysfunctional, but our goal was to get through whatever mission that was assigned to us. And he always talks about Candlestick. Well, when he was running Candlestick, I was the acting lieutenant on day watch. And I tell them, hey, go do what you need to do at Candlestick. Don't worry, I got the district. And invariably, right, we made it work. And so as a family unit, I always tried to make it work for my guys, and even the guys and gals that were in regular patrol, right? So I policed as if they're my family. And sometimes, you gotta take a stern role with your family to get them to do what they need to do, right? And I did that, just like my mom took a stern hand. When I was wrong, she let me know. And when they did something wrong, I let them know. So there was no gray area for us. It was like, this is what I need you to do. I need you to do your job. I ask every cop, just do your job. It is not that hard. You work so hard to maybe get out of giving that police report. Just take the report, right? Just take the report. So.
Yeah, one quick follow-up, if I may, Jack. When we were talking with you the other day, Tracy, you told what I thought was a powerful story of patrolling what you call the cuts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and what I found powerful was you were patrolling, female officer on your own at night, and somebody stopped you and said, that, hey, aren't you afraid? And, you got to be careful out there. Fear comes from the unknown and what we are unfamiliar with. And because of your life experience, I suspect that you're able to deal with things on the street as a police officer without a level of fear that perhaps people who haven't had those experiences do. Can you talk about that for a sec?
I think there's a lot of stuff that I don't know, but the fear of not knowing it shouldn't stop you from doing your job. And so when I was walking through the cuts, as we call them, and I was doing my job, that was my focus. I wasn't worried about, oh, it's me, because I've always pretty much ridden by myself. Even as a patrol officer, I was a single man unit. And so just to go out and do my job, there's enough that we all have to think about or maybe worry about, and I try to not let that influence me. So if I don't let it influence me, I'm able to do my job that much better. And so whatever you do, you can't be afraid. You have to do it because someone is looking at you to do your job, right? So that's what I tried to do. And walking through the cuts, and when the lady asked me that, it didn't even dawn on me. And then we struck up a conversation, and we just started talking. And I think she got to see an officer who was able to do their job and have this conversation with her. And there was no fear not to have that conversation. Because sometimes I think fear lets us not speak to people who maybe don't look like us, don't think like we do, or talk like we do. And we can't let that happen in the job that I'm doing.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Robert, I know you have questions as well.
Yeah, so in an earlier conversation that we had, in a prep conversation with another guest, he talked about how a lot of police forces around the world were increasing the representation of women. And he had explained about how some police forces were even adding up to 50% of their new classes were women. And part of what I'm hearing from you both in your pride as a mother of a graduate student at Johns Hopkins University, but also as the beneficiary of a strong mother, strong grandmother, and with other female role models like Heather Fong. I'm hearing that the role of women as police leaders and as leaders about leadership in general. And I just wanted you to think about or reflect on for us your own role as a police leader, female leader, and what that entails and how you approach that and the kind of impact that you have with that.
I think women, and the women that I've talked about, they were leaders. Maybe we just, besides Chief Fong, my mom and my grandmother, even my sister, it was just something that was, you just had to do. And so using that word leader, I just try to go out and do my job. I don't tell people to do something that I know I wouldn't do. That's part of it. I just think leaders, whether they're, some people say natural born or they develop it. I think for me, myself, maybe it's kind of a mixture of that, but I'm just trying to go out and let people know that as a woman, I bring a certain set of skills to the job. Maybe someone else doesn't, or maybe they do. It's just about how I go about applying that. And so it's hard for me to talk in terms of being a leader because I don't see myself as that. I just don't go around, saying, hey, look at me, I'm a leader, I'm, this and that. It's just, I just keep it focused on what is it that I have to do today. And then sometimes maybe that looks as leadership to some people, which is great. But I guess more I want to inspire people just to do the right thing, just to go out and be able to do their job with all the stuff that's going on today, everything that's happening in the world today. There's still a job to be done, right? And so leadership, you have organizational leadership, and then you have leadership. It could be the cop that's walking the beat. That cop is a leader because he or she is out there doing their job and still showing other people, hey, we show up and this is what we do.
Ken, I know you have questions as well.
Yeah, and it's a direct follow-on to that, I think. Again, just realizing the impact of the first conversation we had with you, Tracy, because all of us are like going back to, wow, that was a great story, and I've got one that really impressed me as well. And I'm just thinking, in terms of leadership and culture, which is kind of what we're trying to dig into here, the way that culture is transmitted is really key. And what culture are we going to transmit is an act of leadership, really. If we're in the position to onboard people, like young officers are coming in, and they may be from very first days directed in one way, or they may be directed in another way. And that's going to probably form a lot of who they are, and then also form ultimately what they contribute to the culture over their career. And so just in that vein, when you talk about just doing your job, some of that involves bringing others in. I'm going to have to go on mute because they're doing a fire alarm thing here. But just in that vein, when you were talking about that experience of onboarding people and helping them to see how to make decisions around not just the training of skills, like Chief Moyer talked about, like we have training, but you need to actually have some education, which is around developing judgment and wisdom. So that story you told, I thought was pretty illuminating to that. Oh, I'm gonna go mute now. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. No, and just to add on to that, we actually had a question emailed to us from Michaela Garland, and this kind of goes along with what Ken's asking for here, which says, what did you do to intentionally influence the culture for both recruits and field training officers in your work with the field training program? And so maybe you can talk of even that example of the new officer that you drove around on that ride along and the take on for similar behavior in different neighborhoods, and how that intentionally shapes even new officers that might know the book, but they don't know how it is supposed to manifest itself in the world.
So as an FTO, you have the ability really to shape your department because you're getting all of these new officers in, and someone needs to show them the right way. And so that ride along that I had with that young officer when we were in the Bayview community, and we're driving around, and he sees a black man having a beer in his threshold of his garage, and he jumps out and he's like, oh, I'm going to take him on. And I'm like, what are you taking him on for? And, you know, he's having a beer in his garage. That's just normal. And he was like, no, you know, self-initiated activity, SIA. And I was like, okay, all right, well, I'm going to see how this goes. And so, you know, I didn't step in. I let him go through his motions and his paces to see what he would do. And I remember the man's wife coming out, and she's looking at me, and I'm giving her the high sign, like, hey, it's going to be okay, don't worry about it. And seeing him try to talk to the gentleman and, you know, relay what he wants to relay to him, and the gentleman telling him, like, I'm just having a beer, it's my garage, why can't I do this? And so the contact ends, you know, nothing happened, but I'm thinking he's learning a lesson. And then we go into another part of the Bayview where it's much nicer, and there are three gentlemen. We drive down 18th Street, and they're having their wine in the threshold of their garage, and he was going to drive right past. And I'm like, hold up, wait a minute, no. If you're going to do it at one area, you got to do it in the other area. And if you're going to take on this black man, where you're going to have to go talk to those three white men also. And he kind of looked at me like, what? And I go, yeah. I go, you have to treat everyone the same. And so it was the perfect moment for him to learn this. And I wasn't mean about it. I wasn't, you know, going off on him. I was like, no, you got to go get out and talk to them too. And so he did. I think he learned a valuable lesson that day, you know, and I told him, I go, just like as a boss, I can't treat people differently. I can't have favorites. I have to treat everyone the same, because the moment someone feels that they're getting treated differently, I have just done something to them that I don't want to do, and that is to make them feel less than. And so I think after we had our conversation, he understood that. And I go, you have to police everyone the same. You know, don't do it because, yeah, you saw a black man drinking a beer. What is that? That's nothing. That's a black man drinking a beer. You saw a white guy drinking a bottle of wine. It's the same thing. So stop treating people differently because of what you see. It's about the behavior, and the behavior has to be across the board the same for everyone. So treat everyone the same. And it goes to that saying, treat everyone as you want to be treated, right? My grandfather always used to tell me, you know, book smarts are great, but what good is a man with no common sense? And he was like, a lot of police work is common sense. You have to have it in order to do your job and really to communicate with people. You know, we meet people from all crosses, all socioeconomic, and you have to be able to conversate with people to do your job effectively. And I think that's what I try to get across.
Yeah, I love that, Tracy. I think two things really shine through. You know, Michael talks a lot about the road to inspiration to mastery starts with the condition of the heart, and your heart set and your way of being. This is who you are. And I love that, because that helps to shift the culture around you, because you are the embodiment of what you say and what you believe. And I think that certainly rings true. And I love that story on FTO as well, because, you know, here in the sterile environment of the San Francisco Police Academy, it's pretty easy to come up with checklists and this is right and this is wrong. But I love in your story how you allowed the person to make the mistake or to get them into a situation,
right?
Not to let them get hurt or killed or kill somebody else, but, you know, to expose them to some risk that requires them to figure out, who am I being right now, and then really understand what their thought process is. And that is so important in the field training program that I don't think gets explained a lot, is that, you know, so much of policing in our books is so much about right and wrong, and it's so obvious, it's black or white. But back on the ranch, in reality, we need cops that are able to discern and be wise and to be nimble, present moment aware problem solvers in those moments, and then be able to recognize how they're manifesting their thoughts. And I think your story really resonates that and is really positive in how you're able to do that. Denise Rodriguez asked a question in the chat box. And she says, many agencies struggle with diversity and, more important, inclusivity. What advice or suggestions do you have on this topic? And what is your approach to mentorship and how you encourage minorities and women to promote and or to become informal leaders?
I guess as far as the mentorship and, you know, the informal leaders, just like I never envisioned that I would be the vice president of the San Francisco Police Officers Association. I did not see that in my future. I was very happy with what I was doing. And it wasn't until I was bugged unmercifully by a former president to get on the union. And I guess that's what it is. You're going to have to keep after people, you know, to say, hey, you know what, I feel that you have the tools to do this, and to constantly just get after them like I was, you know. Mentorship, I know we've tried to get it off of a mentorship program in the police department. I think it's more informal than it is formal. And, you know, I guess you always just have to keep standing up and talking and saying stuff to people. You know, when people come up to me, I constantly tell them, you know, yeah, I didn't envision myself where I would be, but for a few people saying, hey, you know what, Tracy, you need to do this. And so I guess that's what we're going to have to do is I'm going to be now the one to tell some young officer, hey, you need to do this. Just like they're going to have to be the younger officers coming up who want to be involved in the union, who want to promote, you know, up the rank. Someone's going to have to tell them to do that and be their coach and be their cheerleader. So for mentorship, I feel like you got to be a coach, you got to be a cheerleader, you got to be kind of, you know, the person in their ear, maybe, you know, nagging them, grabbing them when they don't want to come along. It's kind of all of that. So, and as far as when I'm out in the field.
Yeah, because you mentored externally too with doing reading partners to little kids.
With the reading partners, yeah. When, you know, we were doing, when I was in Bayview, in order to be on my team, you had to participate as a tutor in reading partners at Hart Elementary School. And we did that I did it for 4.5 years. And everybody knew that, right? That was part of it. And now that we can't do that, guys are sad because they miss that interaction with the young kids, right? So I guess just setting the scene, as they say, to do that and to allow people to do that. That's part of our role. You know, we're part of the community and we need to continue that.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough for starting that program. Bret Hart School was in the shadow of Candlestick Park and right across the street from the Alice Griffith housing development with a lot of violence issues in it. And I remember walking into the school one morning and there was about 300 kids in the hallway. And one little African-American girl turned and looked at me and said, "Are you here to read to us today?" And I will never forget that moment of what is possible when we're able to show up in many different ways.
Wow.
Michael, I know you have follow-up as well.
Yeah, Tracy, I so admire all that you are doing, and just such a shining example for what we should all aspire to be in this great profession called policing. But in your role on the executive board of the POA, you know, police labor organizations historically have protected police officers regardless of their actions. In fact, in Chicago, the judges have ruled continuously that the blue wall of silence is real and it exists. How do you see the role of the police union today, and more importantly in the future, in defending right officer conduct and not defending wrong officer conduct beyond ensuring that they get due process?
Well, first admitting that wrong conduct does happen. You know, that's that hard conversation that we have to have. The diversity that we have on our executive board, you know, our president is a Hispanic male, I'm a Black female, treasurer is a Hispanic male. Like, you have to have that diversity to start those conversations. It's a fine line because as an officer who pays dues to their union, there are certain protections that, you know, they are afforded, right? People talk about due process, innocent until proven guilty. So we have to have that conversation. And plus the landscape has changed. You know, what happened to George Floyd, we all saw throughout the world and what that was, right? Can you imagine what it would have been if we hadn't had that cell phone video, right? I'm sure it would be totally different. And so social media has now given people access into how we do our jobs, upfront access. And we have to deal with that because bad behavior is going to get caught, right? And we have to deal with that. Clear cut misconduct, we need to deal with that swiftly, right? Without a doubt, because if we don't, it just sends the wrong message. And there are plenty of conversations that I have had with our executive board when we are discussing, our legal obligations and about who we are going to defend. Some of it is indefensible, and you have to say that. You have to be bold. Some people say courageous to say, I cannot defend that behavior because one, I was not taught to act like that. I never learned how to do defensive tactics like that. So we have to call it when we see it and don't be afraid. Yeah, there are going to be naysayers, but you're just going to have to deal with that. But as a union, our primary goal is to get the best wages, benefits, and working conditions. And unfortunately, if an officer is involved in something, legal defense, right? We have to do that. But we have to know where to draw that line at, where we're not saying, oh, bad behavior is okay, because it's not across the board, because it affects all of us. What happened in Minneapolis has affected every cop in the United States, without a doubt. And we're all now being looked at through a particular lens, but we're saying, hey, you know what? Not all of us are like that. We go out and we do our jobs. We treat people with the respect that they deserve, right? Because everyone deserves respect, no matter where you come from. So bringing that to the union and pulling the union into the here and now, that's what my job is. And I think I'm doing that job. And if I wasn't, hey, I would have been voted into the position, I think. So we'll see. But yeah, recognizing bad behavior and calling it, hey, spade.
Ken and Robert, I know this is the key angle of discussion. I know we've heard it from the other chiefs we've had on this, talking about how the union holds them back in what they really want to do. I'm sure you have do you have any follow-up on this specifically?
Well, I think, overall, having been in the education union for the last decade, for example, I realized that at the end, unions are a tool, and you can either make art with them or you can be destructive with them. I think it's what our guest is talking about, Tracy's talking about, in terms of it's how you utilize it. And to that point, what do you see the role of unions going forward to get out of this morass that we're in? Do you see unions playing a role in the healing going forward?
I definitely do. We did a lot of community stuff even before I came on to the union, which we continue to do. It's that question, it takes a village. So how do you define policing or unions in that village, in the community, right? So we're trying to get stuff moving. I don't want to be an obstructionist, as they have called unions, about, doing reform. No, because at the end of the day, it's the work product that the officer on the street has to work with. So they got to have the best policies, general orders, no matter what you may call it. They have to know what they can do, right? And to follow good policy, right? Not bad policy. And as a union, we have a place in that because it's about the working conditions. Obama's reform talked about getting buy-in from frontline officers, because ultimately they're the ones who are out there doing the job. And it's so easy to Monday morning quarterback when you don't have to deal with what they all deal with. So we want to be a part of that. We're not hiding from anything. We want to be a part of that because we think together with everyone, we can come up with the best solutions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Robert.
No, I was passing it to you, Ken.
Okay. I recently read an article that came out. It's in the Wall Street Journal on June 16th, and it talks about discrimination and racism within departments, and that frequently we talk about as a challenge between communities and police, but that it's also a challenge within departments. And I just want to, this is a quote from the St. Louis police chief. Keeping in mind, there are a lot of, as you pointed out earlier, there's a lot of regional differences or even differences from neighborhood to neighborhood, right? But what he just said is undeniably there is racial tension among our ranks, adding that new anti-bias training will examine officers' interactions and decisions. So what I'm wondering about, in your experience, again, kind of back to this thing about training versus education for officers, what do you think is an effective way to address that racial tension that that the St. Louis police chief is experiencing? And I don't know if you experience it as much, but if you have, what's been your experience about that? How do you effectively deal with it?
So I think it's exposing people come into this job as soon as possible. So in the academy, bringing up community members from all different communities, like in San Francisco, from the Black community, Hispanic community, Asian community, just so they can talk to people. Because some people, me and Jack, I think, are fortunate because we grew up in San Francisco and it's very, very diverse, right? And I always said it was never a place in San Francisco I felt that I could not go. Well, maybe some people haven't been able to experience that, and all they know is maybe something they see. So you have to expose them as soon as possible. When I had that ride along with that recruit officer and I exposed him to that, he's not a bad person. He was just never exposed to it. And so the unconscious bias that he had, he didn't even recognize it, right? And it wasn't that he was mean or, belligerent to the Black person, not at all. He was very respectful, but he just couldn't see it, and someone needed to bring it out. So we need to bring that out. We have very good officers across all divides, races, creeds, colors, right? They just want to go do their job and be helpful, because this is a calling. It's not a 9 to 5. If you get into it because you want 9 to 5 and weekends off, wrong profession, can't do that. But you have to be made aware of this. So having the bias training, right, is very important, right? We need that. Yeah. So don't get rid of that, because it's key.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting when you say that, because that just reminds me, to defund the police, what's going to get cut? And hopefully it wouldn't be things like that that could get cut. Very likely it could be. Also, just as a closing comment around that, it's just everything you're saying is so critical to this big challenge that was put up, like change the culture of policing. I mean, how do you actually do that? I mean, and what you just said to me is really important on that point, which is, yeah, you need that training, but really what you need is from day one to bring people in a way that they're going to open their mind rather than close it. And it's just a day one thing. And if you get that right, you're going to have a really strong force, is what it sounded like.
You want to get people from all the communities to come in and do this work, right? So when you talk about defunding, what gets cut? Your budget to recruit, your budget to train, and those two things are just too important to lose. I want, more diverse people. I want more women to come in and feel that, yes, they can make a change, whether they stay as an officer their whole career or they promote up. So we all need to come together and really figure it out and stop. I'm here talking. Let's continue the conversation.
And Michael.
Tracy, I hear you reinforcing the power of experience, which is clearly evident in your own story, that has shaped who you are. And right now, San Francisco Police Department is doing something unique, and they've stood up their own Leadership Development Institute, which is open to all levels of the organization, both sworn and non. And the purpose of that Leadership Development Institute is to give members of the San Francisco Police Department broad exposure that will help, amplify their knowledge, experience, wisdom. You are a part of the very first cohort that is soon to be completed. Can you talk for a moment? Has that been valuable to you? And can you see that being a valuable add-on to police departments to broaden the perspective of the entire organization.
Oh, for sure. You know, you need to educate yourself, regardless of where you see your career or really your life going. I never would have heard of David G if we hadn't had LDI. And then, you know, now to read and look at the things that he has done. So we need that, you know, because leaders are everywhere throughout our organization, right? And to have that succession of leadership, this is going to be one way of getting there, having that LDI open to everyone, right? So like I said, whether you decide to promote in your career or not, you can still be a leader, and you might be shaping the future chief of the department for someone from LDI, right? We don't know. I'm hoping, but we need programs like this.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Michael, you were talking so much about one of the tragedies in policing is how much wasted talent is left on the bench because they're never put into a position of leadership to be tapped to see what their untapped potential is. And certainly LDI does that by expanding our minds from business and thought leaders outside of policing that might just have an ability to influence the culture of policing. Robert, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, so I'm just struck by this idea about leadership. And, you know, it reminds me the Nigerian novelist Wole Soyinka talks about a tiger doesn't show its tigritude, it pounces. And the analogy there is a leader doesn't talk about being a leader, that person leads. And you're the exemplar of that. Your stories demonstrate not an effort to be in charge of something, but to actually solve a problem and to take charge. And that is just so, I guess, it gives me so much optimism about this divide that we're in right now, that there is hope of getting out of it sooner rather than later. So thank you for coming on and being with us.
Thank you. I just, like I said, I don't see myself like that. It's just, you know, I want to get out of it. I want us to be better. I want all of us to be better. You know, I look in the mirror every day. I know who I am, you know, and I know what I need to do. And I'm just trying to do it one day at a time. And so to move forward and not move back.
Beautiful.
Ken, any closing thoughts?
This is just such a pleasure to meet you, and I really do anticipate we'll be able to meet you again, hopefully soon. But one thing that I noticed, a little bit similar to what Robert was saying too, I think around leadership and your place, you're really at the front lines of a lot of the gaps and the disjunctures, right, that people are concerned about. You're right at the front line with the POA and the department and the community and history and the future. I mean, you're just right at the front line of all of those things. And so your humility in that is highly appreciated. But I would also offer that the idea that we need to keep this conversation going, as you just said, is something that we value, and what we are seeking, honestly, a part of that is to hopefully support you in staying on that front line of all those different difficult places to stand. So, you know, I think what we will look forward to is learning more about how we can support you further.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Michael.
Yeah, you know, we've had so many police chiefs on here and talked a lot about what leadership is and what leaders should be. And I think you gave us the best definition of leadership and describing it in its simplicity. I think we make leadership too complex. We make it too, you know, what am I supposed to be? Who am I supposed to be? And you said it best, you know, just do what needs to be done and do it right. Be yourself. I mean, how many times have you said just in this, you know, short time we've had together, you know, I'm just being me, you know? So leadership is just authenticity. Just be Tracy, you know, get your heart right. Be committed to take the sacrifice on and do what needs to be done and do it right in the moment. And that's leadership. It doesn't come with stars and bars. It comes with who you are as a human being and what you emanate from your heart. So I'm very, very grateful, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, and I try to be leader for my daughter too. Like we said, you know, I never shied away to tell her what I did for a living. She knew, as well as my nephews, they were all close growing up. And I think they appreciated that because I didn't hide what I did. And, you know, having my daughter do what she's doing right now, she's carrying on the family business of service, maybe not as a police officer, she's getting her master's for nursing, but is to help people, you know, to that you want to help people, because we all need a little help. Every now and then, we all need a little help.
Well, while we all miss being sergeants with our
right,
as we do in our organization, the lieutenant is the one who really carries the weather for the watch, because when that bell rings, you set the tone when you walk into that room for what the next 10 hours, 12 hours, or 14 hours is going to look like. And I could not be more grateful and more honored, more emotional that I'm so grateful to be your friend and so grateful to have you carrying that climate into the culture of the SFPD and onto the streets of San Francisco, including the Western Addition and all of our impoverished and great neighborhoods in San Francisco, that you are the one that walks the walk and embodies courage and nobility wherever you go. Thank you so much, Tracy, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks, neighbor.
Back to you, Becky.
Thank you to all of our panelists today, Jack, for leading us through this very inspiring session. And Tracy, whether you want to own it or not, you really are an inspiration to all of us women and mothers who strive to be really strong in these leadership roles also. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
I want to invite you all that the recording will be posted on the growblueculture.com website. So you can go there and watch this recording as past recordings that we have of our previous webinars. Also, we did get to as many questions as we could today. If you do have any more from today's session or previous sessions, please go to info@growblueculture.com and we'll get your questions there. Next week, we invite you all on July 29th on Wednesday. We're going to have another special session, Q&A session with our panelists. This will give everyone an opportunity to explore what we've learned, but more importantly, we want to hear your thoughts and we want to hear your questions and your stories and give you an opportunity to live interact with our culture anthropologists and our Blue Courage Master Trainers. So please remember to register. Please join us next Wednesday, the 29th, for a panelist Q&A session. And we do hope that you all have a really wonderful weekend. Again, thank you for being here today.